Despite being the queen of pop herself, Madonna is no stranger to criticism. With 14 studio albums under her belt, some of them are bound to be less well received than others. The latter half of her career seems to be filled with her more divisive works, such as Hard Candy or her last album, Madam X. However, there's one album that seems to draw the most ire from fans and general audiences: 2012's MDNA. Was this album truly bad, or was it just misunderstood? MDNA was made in a fairly hectic time in Madge's career. Not only had she divorced from her husband, Guy Ritchie, in 2008, but she was also directing a film called WE, launching fashion lines, and opening gyms named after her last album. Yes, because when I think of fitness, candy is the first thing that comes to mind. Clearly, this was a frantic time, and emotions from her divorce were still fresh and painful. Instead of slowing down, though, Madge felt the need to make even more music, and just like anyone who's been going through way too much, she wanted to dance. She collaborated with several electronic and dance producers, including Martin Solveig, Benny Benassi, and William Orbit. This wasn't her first time collaborating with Orbit, as they had worked together on 1998's Ray of Light and 2000's Music. She had an all-star team, to say the least, complete with old and new collaborators who would help make her EDM dreams come true. The album was preceded by two singles: Give Me All Your Lovin', featuring Nicki Minaj and MIA, and Girl Gone Wild. The former was met with a mixed response. Some people enjoyed its carefree, throwback nature, saying it sounded like an updated version of her older work, while others thought it was too unserious and trying too hard to fit in with the current music scene. Similar criticism would be brought against Girl Gone Wild. Some praised it as a classic-sounding Madonna dance track, while others said it was basic and unmemorable. These criticisms would extend to the album itself, which dropped in March 2012. The general sentiment seemed to be it wasn't daring enough for a Madonna record, and that it was simply following musical trends of the time. But is this true? Is MDNA really a hollow dance album, or is there more underneath its electropop surface? Thematically, MDNA is one of Madge's lighter albums. It mostly consists of peppy dance tracks reminiscent of her earliest records, along with some more reflective tracks that discuss her state of mind during this time in her life. This makes MDNA a mostly impersonal record that offers brief glimpses into her life, which is similar to how her previous two albums were. This could partly explain why some people weren't huge fans of MDNA. When it comes to Madonna's music, it seems to get the most acclaim when she gets personal. Arguably her most critically beloved album, Ray of Light, was a deeply personal record about her spiritual growth and the birth of her daughter. Even American Life, which is a very divisive album, has its defenders, since it's filled with introspective songwriting. MDNA seems to get more flack since the majority of it sounds like it could have been sang by other artists. There's nothing about songs like Love Spent, I'm Addicted, or Turn Up the Radio that really scream Madonna. Maybe this would be passable for another artist, but coming from someone who's known for being innovative and setting musical trends her whole career, it was disappointing for this album to have more of a generic sound. I can understand this criticism, but I have to semi-disagree. I totally agree that much of this album could have been sang by someone else, but I don't really think that's a bad thing. Does everything an artist records have to be personal to them? Many famous artists have discographies that have nothing to do with their lives, but we still love them. Plus, Madonna has an extensive catalog of personal songs, so why shouldn't she get to do a fun party album? If that's the kind of music she wanted to make at the time, then why shouldn't she? Plus, MDNA does have some deeper moments. The closing track, Falling Free, is a contemplative and sorrowful song that sees her letting go of her former relationship. It's a haunting 5 minutes that stands out for being the quietest and most emotionally vulnerable moment on an otherwise noisy album. The song Masterpiece is another emotional one. Written as a soundtrack song for WE, it's about falling in love with someone who seems untouchably perfect, like a work of art. Its more stripped down, almost acoustic production really allows Madonna's soulful performance to shine. It may not be about her life specifically, but you could tell she really feels the emotion. While I do love both of these songs, I love MDNA best when it's in total dance mode. Some of Madonna's most infectiously catchy choruses are here, especially on I'm a Sinner and Superstar. The euphoric rush of songs like I'm Addicted and Turn Up the Radio really delivered the dance floor fantasy she was going for. She even managed to blend folk element with electronic production on the song Love Spent, and it doesn't sound distracting or out of place at all. It kind of reminds me of a song from Music, since that album had a similar folktronica sound. My favorite track has to be I Don't Give a, which was another collab with Nicki Minaj. I feel like this song is generally disliked by fans, and granted, I kind of get it. It's definitely a little cringeworthy, with Madonna pretty much rapping the verses over an electro hip-hop beat, talking about how she has no time for a manicure or forgot the Wi-Fi password. I honestly just think it's goofy fun, and it's my favorite song to sing along with. There's something about her saying, I'm gonna be okay, I don't care what the people say, that just sounds kinda badass. It's so quintessentially Madonna. And of course, Nicki's verse is fire as always. I simply have to scream along when she says, I'm not a businesswoman, I'm a businesswoman. Also, I have to shout out Beautiful Killer, which was a bonus track. This is the coolest sounding song on the album, with its James Bond-like strings and dreadful sense of danger. It was actually based off a 1960s French film that she and Martin Solveig were fans of, and I could definitely see the inspiration, as the song has a thriller movie quality to it. Now, as someone who was in middle school when this album came out, I'll admit I have some bias. 2012 was when I first really started getting into music, and Madonna was one of the first artists I got into. I didn't actually listen to the album in full, or any entire Madonna album outside of her singles until years later, but I still do feel an attachment to this record. It reminds me of this era of music, when electro dance pop was all the rage. As I discussed, Madge worked with some of the top dance producers of the time to create a modern and fresh party record. And while I do understand the criticism of this album trying to fit in with newer artists, I really don't think that makes it bad. In my opinion, MDNA is what her first album would have sounded like if she debuted in 2012. That might be controversial, but hear me out. Like her debut, MDNA is all about losing your inhibitions and enjoying your time on the dance floor. The 80s post-disco sound of her self-titled record is traded in for the heavy electronic synths, four-on-the-floor beats, and vocoded vocals that were popular during this time. The album retains the impassioned and provocative spirit of Burning Up on tracks like Gangbang, Beautiful Killer, and Girl Gone Wild, while also keeping the lighthearted fun of Lucky Star and Holiday on tracks like Superstar and Give Me All Your Lovin'. I'm not saying these albums sound like each other, but I feel like they both represent Madonna at her fluffiest. MDNA is, at its core, a let-loose album about having fun, just like her self-titled record. And why shouldn't Madonna have fun? The girl just got a divorce, shot a movie, and opened up a bunch of gyms. Let the girl live. As someone who loves pop music at its most mindless, I appreciate MDNA for reveling in its silliness. That's not to say it's totally devoid of emotion, or that I don't appreciate when artists get more personal, but sometimes all you need is some bouncy, carefree music. I respect everyone's opinions, and if someone doesn't like MDNA, I truly don't care. You do you, boo. But for me, while I wouldn't say it's in my top Madonna albums, it's definitely one I still love. If you haven't listened to it in a while, or didn't like it when it came out, I recommend going back and giving it another shot. We could all use a lighthearted album right now, and MDNA delivers on that.